नमस्कार दोस्तों, आप सबका स्वागत है श्रीराम IAS में। आप सबका स्वागत है इस डिटेल्ड एनालिसिस ऑफ पेपर 4 में। एथिक्स के पेपर में 2025 का मेंस हो गया है और एथिक्स का पेपर बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट पेपर है जो आपको 250 मार्क्स में से मैक्सिमम मार्क्स दिलवा सकता है। सो लेट्स dive deep and see what was asked in 2025 in the ethics paper. So we are going to discuss all the papers. Case studies will be dealt with in a separate video. So in total there will be 13 questions and we'll look after each and every one of them. So this was the first one, 1A. In the present digital age, social media has revolutionized our way of communication and interaction. Of course, this has happened. Because of social media, the communication and interaction between human beings have changed considerably, isn't it? A considerable change has been brought. आप तो कुछ समय पहले तक देखें फेसबुक जैसी या इंस्टाग्राम या फिर लिंक्डइन जैसी कोई चीज़ें, सोशल मीडिया जैसी चीज़ें नहीं थी, व्हाट्सएप जैसी कोई चीज़ें नहीं थी, बट कुछ अलग ही प्रकार से कम्युनिकेशन होता था, अलग ही प्रकार से इंटरेक्शन होता था। खत लिख कर होता था, टेलीग्राम से होता था, टेलीग्राफ से होता था, न्यूज़पेपर के थ्रू होता था, टेलीविज़न थी तो बहुत लेट आई, रेडियो था उससे पहले। सो बहुत आगे टेक्नोलॉजी बढ़ गई है और उस चीज़ पर एक क्वेश्चन पूछा है, कुछ एथिकल कंसर्न यूपीएससी ने इस क्वेश्चन में रेज किया है। हाउएवर इट हैज़ रेज्ड सेवरल एथिकल इश्यूज एंड चैलेंजेस। ऑफ कोर्स there are ethical issues and challenges also, of course, but what the question is trying to ask, describe key ethical dilemmas in this regard. Now what is a dilemma? आप हमेशा याद रखना, dilemma का मतलब एक करेक्ट चीज़ और एक रॉन्ग चीज़ नहीं होता है। dilemma का हमेशा मतलब होता है कि दोनों ही बातें करेक्ट हैं और इनमें से किसी एक को चूज करना है। That is what is dilemma. dilemma का कुछ लोग गलत मतलब समझते हैं, that you have to choose between the right and the wrong. नहीं, you both the things are right. You have to choose one of them. That's the dilemma. तो अब सोशल मीडिया के आने से कम्युनिकेशन और इंटरेक्शन बहुत रिवोल्यूशनाइज्ड हो गया है, बट इसकी वजह से कुछ एथिकल डिलेमास भी हैं। वो क्या क्या हैं? तो कुछ एथिकल डिलेमास अपन पढ़ेंगे। राइट टू प्राइवेसी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ है, बट सीधी राइट टू सिक्योरिटी के साथ खड़ी रहती है। अगर स्टेट आपका डेटा यूज़ करता है या फिर कोई भी, मान लीजिए आपका आधार कार्ड बन रहा है और बहुत सारे लोगों का इसी तरह से आधार कार्ड बन रहा है, तो आप अपना बायोमेट्रिक डेटा, आप अपना किसी भी दूसरे प्रकार का डेटा, नाम, पता, पिताजी का नाम, डेट ऑफ बर्थ, वो सबका सब किसी एक पर्टिकुलर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को दे रहे हैं। व्हाट इफ दैट डेटा इज मिसयूज्ड समवेयर एल्स? थिंक अबाउट इट। सो the dilemma here is right to privacy on one hand and right to security on the other hand. Now the other one, freedom of expression versus protection from harm. So freedom of expression, आप अपने सोशल मीडिया अकाउंट से काफ़ी कुछ एक्सप्रेस कर सकते हैं, बट when it comes to protection from harm, there is a possibility that people may take it negatively. There can be a huge roar over whatever you have posted. There are also laws so that you remain in your limits while talking about your own rights, your own freedoms. No freedom is absolute and certain limits, reasonable restrictions have to be imposed, and that is the reason one big ethical dilemma comes in between the freedom of expression and protection from harm. Another thing, transparency and confidentiality. Again ये वही आधार वाला जो मैंने आपको एग्जाम्पल दिया, दैट ट्रांसपेरेंसी ऑन वन हैंड मस्ट बी मेंटेन्ड, कि भाई डेटा को किस तरह से स्टोर किया जा रहा है, कैसे किया जा रहा है, डेटा को कहीं बांटा तो नहीं जा रहा है, किसी को दिया तो नहीं जा रहा है, बेचा तो नहीं जा रहा है। ऑन द अदर हैंड देयर हैज़ टू बी सम काइंड ऑफ accountability. It's a very, very important thing. Moving on, global connectivity versus cultural sensitivity. So global connectivity communication का part है, बहुत important part है, and on the other hand you must have cultural sensitivity as well. बहुत सारे लोग दूसरी जगहों पे मूव तो कर जाते हैं, ग्लोबल कनेक्टिविटी इज़ अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग, बट उनको वहाँ के तौर तरीके पता नहीं होते हैं। कई बार it is causing harm to the local communities which are living there, and at the same time it is causing harm to the environment. So this is another ethical dilemma. Innovation versus responsibility. Because of increasing innovation in the society, things are becoming very easy. And also there is a huge amount of competition which is coming up in innovating things. That is important for the growth and the stability of the society, to grow for the intellectual development of the society on one hand, but at the same time the innovation should not become negative and people should not lose the responsibility. For example, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, these are becoming the tools in everybody's hand today. But think about a situation if they are not used responsibly. So this is again a ethical dilemma. So all these ethical dilemma can be expressed in the question by you and you can obtain marks. Now moving on to the other one, constitutional morality is not a natural sentiment but a product of civil education and adherence to the rule of law. So civil education and rule of law is what reflected through constitutional morality. Now on the basis of this, examine the significance of constitutional morality for public servants, highlighting the role of promoting good governance and ensuring accountability in the public administration. So the role of public servant are twofold. One is good governance. They ensure good governance. On the other hand, they have to ensure accountability. Both of them have to be adhered to by a civil servant. Now, how can civil servant use the constitutional morality in order to ensure good governance and ensure accountability? Now, what is constitutional morality? It has to be seen. Constitutional morality is nothing more than the values which are enshrined in the Indian Constitution. It is reflected in preamble. These values are reflected in fundamental rights, directive principles, fundamental duties, and everybody should adhere by it. Everybody, not only the public servants, not only the bureaucrats, not only the judges, but also the normal common citizens of the society. That is the reason why it has also been called as civil education, a part of civil education. There are many provisions of the Indian Constitution which go beyond the text, but the essence is very, very important. Now, for a public servant and his role and her role through constitutional morality in ensuring the good governance and ensuring accountability, what can be done? To act impartially. Okay, there shall not be any kind of partiality from the behalf of the civil servant. Act ethically in the public interest and ensuring accountability. This can be done. All the work which is done by a public servant, a decision taken by a public servant, policy formulation done by a public servant must be impartial, must take into account that there shall not be any kind of discrimination. Now, discrimination in the Indian society exists. We did have formal equality in our society, but still the substantial or the effective equality needs to be implemented on ground. And that is the reason why any civil servant must have transparency. You know, the policy formulation must be transparent, the implementation must be transparent, should be impartial, and he should keep himself accountable. That is very, very important. That efficiency and effectiveness for good governance only comes when you correctly work in the right direction, making constitutional morality as your backing. That is very important. It's a very important thing. So, in order to bring in good governance, in order to ensure accountability in the society, what a civil servant needs to do, needs to be impartial, needs to follow the constitutional morality, and impartiality, accountability, non-favoritism, all these things are the part of constitutional morality. You know, these are those values which are not explicitly written in the Constitution, but in one or the other way, they are the essence of the Constitution. The Constitution is through which the whole government setup runs, and the government setup has to run, keeping in mind several values, and these values can be the values of accountability, impartiality, and other things. Important thing to keep in mind, very important question. Moving on. Karl von Clausewitz once said, now Karl von Clausewitz was a philosopher. He said that war is a diplomacy by other means. So what he's trying to say is war and diplomacy, though they go hand in hand, and war is another way of showing diplomacy in the international relations. Now, if you see the international relations, war are fought. First World War was fought, Second World War was fought, after that many wars were fought. Recently, there are two important wars which are going on, the Israel and Hamas war, Gaza, and on the other hand, Ukraine and Russia. Recently, India was also involved in a conflict with Pakistan during Operation Sindoor after the Pahalgam attack. Now, the war is not the end of the world. That's what he wants to say. He wants to say that war in one way is also diplomacy. War is done to achieve several goals. Now, what was the goal during Operation Sindoor? To teach a lesson, to stop any kind of state-sponsored terrorism from Pakistan. At the same time, to show that we are not going to sit down while you do the act of terror on us. In one way, we can also say hurting the sovereignty of the country will not be tolerated. Also, a new policy of the Indian government that the act of terror will be considered as an act of war. Again, it shows this statement in a very positive light, that war is used as a diplomacy. Now, if you see war as a policy here, conflicts are rarely random. Now, you see conflicts are going on in all the continents. In Asia, if you see there is a conflict or there is some kind of tension goes on between China and Japan, between India and China, between India and Pakistan, between Iran and the other countries of that region, between Iran and Saudi, between Iran and Israel. Now, I am telling only about Asia. The tensions are also going on in the other parts of the globe, and war can become, and war is a kind of diplomacy which is used to achieve several goals. And there are modern ways of looking into warfare. Warfare does not only mean that you send armies, foot soldiers to fight, but there is a concept of modern warfare also, economic sanctions. Rampantly seen. Now the US is putting tariffs and sanctions. Russia has been sanctioned so many times because it has waged a war against Ukraine. So these sanctions are always there. They are an extension of modern warfare. Cyber attacks, proxy conflicts, all these things keeps happening, and these are the new modern tool of warfare. Now, when you have these tools of warfare, thanks to the technology nowadays, we can say that they are also used diplomatically. So in an international relation, war is used as a diplomatic tool. Asymmetrical conflicts are also there, not symmetrical. Rise of the non-state actors such as the terrorist groups originating from Pakistan against India. Hybrid warfare where non-state actors are fighting at the same time. The army, the navy, the air force of the state is also fighting. So all these things are going on, and we can very well conclude this statement to be a correct one, where war is a diplomacy by other means. Moving on. Keeping the national security in mind, examine the ethical dilemma related to sensitive controversies over environmental clearances. So when it comes to environmental clearances of the developmental project, some ethical dilemma comes into the viewpoint from the ecological broader area. Now, what's this dilemma? On one hand, you need development, you need the developmental project, you need that there shall be bridges, there shall be roads, highways, railways, but to construct such kind of infrastructure, such kind of physical infrastructure, afforestation has to be done, trees needs to be cut. So on one hand, you have these developmental needs, and on the other hand, you have the environmental issues, where at the world stage, India is promising to become more greener. Intended nationally determined contribution have been shared at the international level, at the international stage by India, and at the same time, what's happening, our developmental needs are also growing, so we need the physical infrastructure. So there's always this dilemma between need for development on one hand and environmental protection on the other hand. Clean environment on one hand and right to livelihood and And on the other hand, now there was a very famous case recently where, and both of them, if you try to understand, is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. So there was a place in Mumbai which was taken over by slum dwellers, and slums were made. So few people approached the court saying, the Bombay High Court saying in a petition, that this is against the clean environment, because the slums do come to these areas, and these areas being greener areas, they destroy the clean environment and the environment at these localities. On the other hand, the lawyers of the slum dwellers said that if you remove these slum dwellers from there, it will be against their livelihood, which is again a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. So there are tussles like this which are happening in the court, and this is one very important ethical dilemma. Of course, the Supreme Court and the High Court ruled in the favor of the livelihood, because livelihood cannot be compromised by sacrificing. If a little sacrifice of the environment has to be done, it's okay, but the livelihood of the people cannot be snatched just because several people think that they are against the clean environment. Such was the view taken, and the views of the court also can change over a period of time. So these things are important, and the most important thing here is the ethical dilemma which is coming up. Now, what is the ethical concern in these kind of projects? Displacement of communities. People who have been living in that area from a very long time, they have emotional connect with that area. They have lived there, their forefathers have lived there, has to move, has to go and get displaced somewhere else, has to settle and resettle somewhere else because there is a dam project coming up. Mostly tribals are the one who are suffering in these kind of decision making. Destruction of biodiversity, of course. Long-term environmental damages are there. To make big dams, you need to cut trees. This happens. And dams have their own ecological concerns. Strategic necessity for national security infrastructure. So when it comes to the national security infrastructure, you need to construct several things which are directly against the environmental concern. Okay. Now, balanced approach needs to be there. There has to be this environmental impact assessment. This impact assessment, unfortunately, has not been followed with all the spirit it needs to be done. Several times, this environmental impact assessment process has also been corrupted, which should not be the case. And the ethical framework that considers the right of the local population, these are important things. What is the focus point? The local population. What is the focus point? The long-term ecological sustainability of the place. Unless you make your policy keeping these things in mind, it is going to be very difficult to eliminate these kind of dilemmas. The development has to go in hand with the developmental needs of the society. Both has to happen together. Moving on. Those who are in trouble, untroubled are, will trouble itself. That simply means if you remain stable during trouble, then even the trouble is going to run away from your life. You are going to make the trouble itself fearful, and this was said by a great southern Indian philosopher, Thiruvallur. Now, a little bit about Thiruvallur, and UPSC keeps asking questions about the great personalities like Thiruvallur. Thiruvallur, commonly known as Vallur, was an Indian poet, philosopher. He is best known as the author of Tirukural. Now, what is Tirukural? A collection of couplets on ethics, political and economic matters, and also love. So he was a very, very important philosopher. He has said several things, and one of the things he has said about the stability which you should have, the courage which you should have, the forbearance you should have. Emphasizes on the resilience and mental fortitude, that even if some kind of difficulty is coming, even if there is some kind of trouble in your life, you need to stay put. You need to keep working towards the goal you are working. Because chinta karne se चिता की तरफ जाते हैं। चिंतन करने से चीज़ें ठीक हो जाती है। दिस इज समथिंग विच यू मस्ट understand. You have to contemplate rather than being worried about things. And at the same time, there was an example, let me tell you, the German minister who committed suicide during the COVID-19 pandemic. I just don't get it. Why did he committed suicide? Because he was unable to control the number of deaths happening. Of course, but dying is not a solution. He must have been working very hard and, sorry to the mental state he was in, but at the same time, he should have shown more mental resilience and fortitude. That is what is expected out of human beings, because several conditions does come in the human life where you actually have to show such kind of mental resilience, where you have to show some kind of toughness, where you have to show courage, and there cannot be looking back from such a place. You always have to move forward. A calm and an untroubled mind can overcome any problem. So when you write this question, you need to keep in mind these important points. What the question was asking, what is the demand of the question, and how you are going to use that. The perspective is very important. How you are going to use these qualities which are mentioned here in the present life. Okay, moving on. The greatest discovery of my generation is that a human being can alter his life by altering his attitude. So mostly it is about the attitude, and this is said by William James, who is an American philosopher and psychologist, one of the most influential philosopher, and is often dubbed as the father of American psychology. So the father of American psychology is talking about attitude and saying that human being can alter his life by altering his attitude. Such an important place has been given to attitude. Attitude is very important. Attitudes can be made, it can be either positive, it can be negative. Attitude are constructed because of the influence you have from family, from school, from colleges, from your friends. Sometimes the social conditioning is also responsible in order to construct your attitude. And once you make an attitude, and if it turns out to be a positive attitude, then there is no looking back in the life. Think of a very, very simple example of the example which everybody gives, but it's a very simple and perfect example. A glass half filled and a glass half empty. How do you look at something? That shows your attitude. How do you treat something? How do you respond to a situation? That shows your attitude. And the attitude is everything. Attitude changes your life. Attitude can actually alter your life. If there are troubles in your life, if there are problems in your life, and if you see it in a positive attitude, thinking that this is bringing resilience to me, this is teaching me in some or the other way, you will pass through those troubles, those problems in a very positive fashion. And also you have to remember that afterwards you will be in a pretty much better shape. That is the gift of attitude. That is the gift of positive attitude. But if you make a negative attitude towards the trouble and the problems in life, then always there will be some or the other problem, and a person can never be at harmony, peace, or in the state of happiness and joy. So highlights the power of attitude and mindset. Mindset is very important. A person's life is transformed not by the external events, but by the internal perspective. So it's all about attitude. The strength of a society is not in its laws, but in the morality of its people. This is said by Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda does not need any kind of introduction. I am taking it as a sort of a fact that you all know about Swami Vivekananda. He was a great Indian sage, the president of Ram Krishna Mission, and he went to Chicago to give a lecture. He went to US, and in Chicago he gave a lecture that was a very, very important speech on religion. He has shown the importance to the world about spirituality and Hinduism. And he's a very, very important personality as far as our country goes. So he's saying that strength of a society is not in its laws, but in morality. So law versus morality, or human behavior, or the quality of human being. That is the basis of what UPSC wants to ask here. So you may have law, you may have regulation, you may have rules for everything, but if the quality of man is not good, what is the use of all those things? It was said in the Constituent Assembly that the Constitution is for humans. The Constitution is made for men, for the citizens. And if the citizens does not uphold the moral principles, then the Constitution will be of no use. Similarly, all the rules, regulations made in an institution, made in an organization, can only be successful, can only take the organization or institution towards more effectiveness, more efficiency, better governance, when the human beings, the beings, the people working there hold on to the morality, hold on to the positive attitude. Then only something can grow. So it's not the laws, it is the human morality which is far more important. So it stresses that the society's true strength lies in morality. If you do not have a constitution but moral character, all the people, society will be harmonious. Society will work in a nice way. Think about, there will not be any unethical practice going on. There will not be a domination of one group over the other, one culture over the other, but rather respect for everybody. There shall be tolerance, there will be acceptance in the society if you have the moral backing. But even if rules are there and there is no morality, rules then can be tweaked to be used against human beings, against the established structures and organizations. So this is something which we must understand. The strength of people lies in, the strength of society lies in morality and ethical character of its people, not just the legal framework. Moving on. For any kind of social re-engineering, by successfully implementing welfare schemes, a civil servant must reason and critical thinking in an ethical framework. Justify this statement with suitable examples. So, reasoning and critical thinking are paramount. Ethical basis has to be there to the reasoning and critical thinking for implementation of a welfare scheme. Now, if you have to implement a welfare scheme, now India is a sort of a socialist country, and socialism is not interpreted only as a economic philosophy or a political philosophy, but rather it shows the welfaristic state of the society. Now, if you have that welfaristic state, so welfare schemes would be there for the upliftment of the backward downtrodden in the society. Now, if anything like that is happening in the society, the basis of it must be ethical, and at the same time it should have reasoning, logic and critical thinking. It's a very simple question and it's a very, very important thing. So, use of reason, critical thinking to identify and address the root causes of social problems. So, if there is any social problem, there is any economic problem, anything which is coming up, let's say, for example, there was the problem of nutrition and education both, that the children in India lacked nutrition and at the same time they lacked the education. So a great scheme called the midday meal scheme was brought forward, where in the schools nutritious food was also given. So एक scheme से दो निशाने. The one scheme helped to achieve two important goals, one of nutrition and the other of education. Students were attracted to go to the school because they would get nutritious food, and at the same time the joy of eating together, that the community feeling of eating together was there, and it has helped the kids to become more healthy and at the same time study in the school. It's a very, very important. So what must have gone through while planning this? Critical thinking is needed. Okay, rationalization is needed. Moving on to the root cause is needed, and at the same time, all of them has to be backed by the ethical framework, has to be backed by ethics. So what's the ethical framework here? Implemented transparently, without corruption, and it should reach the most deserving people. That's the most important thing. Any welfare scheme, if it is only helping few top most people in the society, it's of no use. The target has to be very, very precise. The target has to reach to the desired goal, deserving population and beneficiary. Like the data driven targeting is one very important example with transparency. Moving on. What are the major teachings of Mahavir? Explain their relevance in the contemporary world. Now, these are important 5 teachings of Mahavir, and what are their relevance in the contemporary world? Now, Mahavir is a very great philosopher, the establisher of a major religion in India, and he has told so many things about ethics. And these 5 important teachings which is given by Mahavir are not only true during the time in which he lived, but also for the future times, and it will be relevant for the coming times as well, because these are the important ethical basis of the society. If you look, ahimsa, non-violence. Now, non-violence, when Mahavir talks about non-violence, he doesn't only say that you should not go out and start to fight with somebody. No, that's not the thing. But cruelty towards animal, cruelty towards the nature, cruelty towards the natural resources, nothing must be done, because every such act will be an act of violence, which has to be tolerated. There shall be non-violence, ahimsa. Aparigraha, non-attachment. This has been said in all the religions of the world. Attachment always brings misery. If there is non-attachment, if you want to achieve a goal and if you are unable to do that, and because of that you go into depression because you were so much attached to that goal, that's of no use. Human well-being, your own well-being is of paramount importance. Okay? If you have attachment, there is also a tendency in the human being to control the lives of the other people. But because you do not have attachment, then life can be lived freely. Not only your life would be free, but you will make the other people's life also free. Asteya, non-stealing. Non-stealing does not mean entering somebody's room and taking up something, or going and taking out something from a purse of a lady. Stealing also means that not touching somebody else's stuff, not touching somebody else's, provisioning without the permission. That's a very important ethical principle and a way of life in Jainism. Brahmacharya, self-restraint. It's very important in the present life. Don't you see that people are falling prey to many desires? It can be alcoholism, it can be overeating, desires related to so many things. Some kind of self-restraint is needed, because in today's world, in the world of artificial intelligence and social media, distractions can be so many, and if there is lack of self-restraint, there is a high possibility that people may lose their time, may lose their life in indulgence in negative aspects of life. That is the reason why self-restraint is very, very important. And satya, truth. Now, truth, again, one of the most foundational value of human being. You cannot hide the truth. Even if you hide the truth, it is going to shine from beneath the surface. And this was true not only thousands of years back, it is true even today, and it will be true in the future also. Truth is the basis. It comes out, if not today, at some other time, but it comes out. Along with it, the values of compassion, tolerance and forbearance, and courage and fortitude are also important, given by Lord Mahavir. One who is devoted to one's duty attains highest perfection in life. So if you are devoted to your duty, you gain highest perfection in life. Analyze this statement with reference to the sense of responsibility and personal fulfillment as a civil servant. Now, if you are made a civil servant, responsibility and duty must be the basis of your services, isn't it? And if you keep doing that, if you keep fulfilling your responsibility, if you keep helping the society, if you keep serving the society, you will fulfill so many dreams. And that brings contentment to you. That is what is mentioned here. One who is devoted to one's duty attains highest perfection in life. When they talk about perfection, it can be interpreted in so many ways. Perfection in work is one thing, but contentment, perfection of soul, that is another thing. So if you keep serving, if you take your responsibility to be the highest value while serving the society as a civil servant, then that perfection of the soul will be reflected. So it talks about responsibility, means devotion to the duty leads to making individual lives better. And personal fulfillment through service. The personal fulfillment in all the aspects of life, including the contentment, including the happiness and joy of serving the others. There is no meaning of being a civil servant until and unless you have joy in serving. You should never have a self-serving attitude, but service to the society should be the motto. To achieve holistic development goals, a civil servant acts as an enabler and achieve an active facilitator to growth rather than a regulator. Okay. What specific measures will you suggest to achieve this goal? So a civil servant has to act as an enabler and facilitator, but not as a regulator. And how can that be achieved? So there has to be a shift in role. So the civil servant has to move away from being a rigid regulator and become an enabler or a facilitator of the development. How can it be? By simplifying rules. Okay, complexity of rule is one such thing which not only complexes the public at large but also the civil servant. In some or the other way, the policy implementation, the policy formulation will be impacted if the rules, regulations are not simple. So this is one thing. To become facilitator and not to be a regulator, the first thing must be simplified rules. While drafting the policy, while formulating the policy, this thing has to be kept in mind that in order to be enabler, active enabler, the rules and the regulations which must be there in this policy should be simple. Providing single window clearances, yes, it's an important thing. If there are too many regulatory provisions which are there in a particular policy, let's say if you have to open up a business and for that the government is ready to give you 60%, 70% of the loan. But if there is a single window clearance, things can go better, but if you have to go to every other office in order to get the permission, that is going to be a problematic thing. The chances of corruption increases, the chances of red tapeism and favoritism increases. I hope you're getting it. So single window clearance is another thing. Fostering public-private partnership, a very important thing. The public needs to join hand with the private. Things in today's society has to go in hand, means hand in hand with the public has to go hand in hand with the private. Only the public sector cannot develop the society, neither only the private sector can develop the society. There has to be the contribution which should come from both the sides. And this is very important when it comes to becoming an active enabler or facilitator. Sometimes you have to be at the corner and let the private sector work for the development of the society. It's important, not always being a regulator helps. In order to achieve that active facilitator role, all these things needs to be done. Using technology to reduce bureaucratic hurdle. Now, technology has become a very important point, a very important aspect of governance. At every level of governance, technology is included. And now with the coming of the artificial intelligence, things have becoming more and more simple for the machinery of the bureaucracy. And these needs to be actively implemented, actively included in the governance. The officer, the public servant who is doing it will reap the result very quickly, and the person who is not doing it has to wait for the result for a very, very long time. Now, in order to simplify things, inclusion of technology again is a very important tool. So, moving forward, it is said that for an ethical work culture, there must be code of ethics in place in every organization. So, it's talking about code of ethics. To ensure value-based and compliance-based work culture, what suitable measures would you adopt in your workplace? So if you have a workplace, and if let's say you are a public servant, then the question asked, in your workplace, what suitable measure will you adopt to do what? To ensure value-based, compliance-based work culture. So there are several key measures here. Leadership by example, that is one thing. Regular ethical training, that is another thing. System that rewards ethical behavior. Now, generally it is seen when it comes to the organizations, when it comes to the work culture, that effectiveness, that efficiency is always awarded. Now, there is nothing wrong in awarding efficiency, in awarding effectiveness. But at the same time, the effectiveness, the efficiency must not come at the cost of ethical behavior. You have to do things quickly and you have to do things effectively. Should not take out the ethical aspect from the decision making. The values of compassion, sympathy, empathy must always be reflected in the work which you do and in the decision making which you do. So, leadership is not only about delivering something effectively and delivering something efficiently, but at the same time, delivering something in a very, very ethical manner. You have to take care of the people who are with you. You have to listen to them. You have to train them in ethical behavior. You have to discourage the unethical, immoral behavior. You know, the award must be for the ethical behavior. The award is always given for efficiency and effectiveness, but in order for your workplace to be more ethical, the award must be on the ethical behavior. And if the organization works on the ethical behavior, of course, automatically at one point in time, efficiency and effectiveness will be seen. Efficiency and effectiveness without the ethical behavior is a short-term process. You are not going to reach the desired goal with the efficiency and effectiveness if you do not pay attention towards the ethical conduct or ethical behavior. So that is what the question is all about. Now, 2-3 more things are there, but the majority of the things have been completed. The suitable measures are these which must be implemented. Moving on. India is an emerging economic power of the world, as it has recently secured the status of 4th largest economy of the world as per IMF projection. However, it has been observed that in some sectors, allocated funds remain either underutilized or misutilized. So, underutilization of fund, misutilization of fund, they are the big problems in India. What specific measure would you recommend for ensuring accountability in this regard to stop leakages, gaining the status of 3rd largest? So from 4th largest economy, if you have to become 3rd largest economy, then there shall not be underutilization and misutilization of the allocated funds. Now what the question is trying to ask is specific measures to stop underutilization or misutilization of the funds for ensuring accountability, transparency. They are the big factor here. Now, the ethical dilemma here is that On one hand, you have to be very, very effective, very, very efficient. But on the other hand, because of this effectiveness and efficiency, at times, some fund are misutilized and much of the fund are underutilized. Sometimes it is also, the lack of accountability. Sometimes it is also the lack of vigor, the lack of interest in the development of the society, which leads to underutilization and misutilization of the fund. Now, how to change this? The focus area must be the human capital development. Again, coming back to the same principle that the quality of man is more important than the quality of law. So, human capital development, not only for effectiveness and efficiency, but also for ethical behavior and building institution. Now, the institution building is very, very important. Any kind of institution which you have in the country must be built on very, very strong foundation, and it cannot have a strong foundation until you have the ethical framework in place. That is important for us to understand. So, building foundation and human capital, they shall be the focus area. Now, what are the solution? Implementing direct benefit transfer. These are the specific things which can be done in order to reduce the underutilization and misutilization. Implementing direct benefit transfer, this is one way so that the leakages can be reduced. Leveraging technology for transparency and real-time audits. Now, real-time audit, the feedback mechanism is always important. Until and unless you take the feedback of the policy which you have formulated and are implementing, the next policy which will be made will also have loopholes. So, real-time audit is very much important. Social audit is very much important. Strengthening anti-corruption bodies, very important. People who are civil servants, if they are not accountable, then they must be held accountable by the anti-corruption bodies. Promoting accountability in public spending. So, there are many ways in promoting accountability. At the same time, there must also be transparency. So, these were the questions which are asked by UPSC in 2025 ethics paper. Thank you very much for joining me in this. Have a nice day. Jai Hind.